This is my old 720. I'm going to show you how the pony motor works. Little 4-cylinder. We've modified it to work on 2 separate coils rather than the John Deere coils, but you can only run it on 2 cylinders, so it's barely got enough power to start it. But we're going to show it to you, and then we got the factory coils ordered. When we get them, we're going to put them in. We'll show you how that works. Right here you'll see where we mounted 2 coils, and we got 2 plug wires going to two of the 4 cylinders. You can see where we got the back 2 cylinders off. There's the 2 front ones. You look back here, you'll see the back 2. So we're only running it on 2 cylinders. But believe it or not, it's got enough power to start the engine up. We're going to get it in the shop in here. We're going to put the factory coils back in the mag, and we're going to we just put these back tires on it. They're used, but they're good enough for me. And then we got a couple of new front tires to put on it because they're junk. So we're going to fire the thing up here and let you listen to it run, and then we're going to take her in the shop and get ready to put some tires on it. The old 720. I've had this old girl for over 30 years, and she hasn't had much love in her life, so we're going to we're giving her some love. We took the starter off and we put all new brushes in it. We're going to show you that. We took the pony motor here and we put the factory coils back in it. We're going to show you that. We put some used back tires on it that are good and decent. I had to put a new rim on this. It had a calcium chloride wheel. It was all ate up. My brother found me a wheel. I'm putting 2 new steer tires on it. We're going to take it outside and we're going to give it a bath and clean it up. And it's just a good old tractor, but it just needs a little bit of love, and we're going to give it a little bit of love. You can see our new factory coils we put in here for our pony motor. We got a fuel leak. I think it's coming out of the settling bowl. We need to get that fixed. I might even buy a new seat for it. I don't know yet, but we need to work on the brakes. The brakes don't work. We get these tires put on here. So when they send you a pair of tires where the beads are touching each other like that right there, they're so close. What a pain in the butt to put a tire or tube in. What I do is I go down here and I cut about 6 different blocks, and I stick 6 blocks in there, let it sit for about 3 days. And you won't have that problem trying to put a tube in there. So just get you some little wooden blocks and stick them in between the beads all the way around the tire and leave it sit for about 3 days. And here's another good tip. If you're going to change your own tires and you don't know what you're doing, don't do it, because your life's worth more than what the tires are. But if you don't have one of these and you're working on a tube type tire, this screws onto the valve stem. Once you get the valve stem through there, this screws onto the valve stem and it holds the valve stem up into the wheel. So as you carefully mount the tire, you don't lose your valve inside the tire. And the other thing is when you put a tube type tire on a wheel, air it up once and then let all the air out of it and then air it up the second time. That gets the tube straight inside the rim. So just a little tip there for you. So I was changing these tires and it brought back an old memory, so I want to tell you all about it. When I was in high school, I worked for a tire dealer, a Firestone and Uniroyal tire dealer. And I worked there 4 hours a day, and I worked there 8 hours on a Saturday. I'd come in on a Saturday and there'd be 2 school buses out there to put tires on. And they were all split rim 10-120s and big, always busy. But there was this one guy that come in there all the time. He hauled junk for a living. Him and his grandson drove and he rode in the truck. And he'd come in there just about once a week with usually about 3 flat tires at the same time. So I took the first one off and I took it back there and I dismounted it and I put it in the tire machine, spread it apart and pulled the tube out of it. And it had about 60 patches in this inner tube. And I walked it up and I showed it to the man and I said, "What are you wanting to do here?" I said, "You thinking about a new tube or?" "Well," he said, "I think you could probably just put another patch in it." I went back and there was patches on top of patches. I put patch in it and I put it back on. And he's the only man that ever tipped me. The whole time I worked for that place, he's the only man that ever tipped me. And he probably didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. But the way he tipped me was he'd go to the soda machine and he'd buy me a soda and walk up and hand it to me and he'd thank me and he'd get back in his truck and he left. So I've never forgot that man after all these years. So if you ever have to go get some tires changed someplace, make sure you give the guy a tip, because I'll tell you what, he'll probably remember you for the rest of his life. So just something for you to think about there. So the old pony motor starter. Let me show you what's left of these brushes. Here's one of the old ones. Here's the new one. Nothing left of them. Completely burned off of there. The armature is going to need a little bit of cleaning up. We'll get her. Get her all put back together and we'll go again, but a little delay here on the pony motor until we get this fixed now. So you'll see we get this housing all cleaned up here. We polished the armature and all the commutator segments. We've cleaned and polished and got all that grud and particles out of there. Got the armature all cleaned up. We got the field's all cleaned up, the housing all cleaned up, and we're just about ready to put it all back together. But I was going to tell you that the brushes have a little bit of an angle on them when you get them, and you'll see the way they go. So what I like to do is put the armature in the tail housing here, put my new brushes on there, and then hold the brush down tight when you're tightening it up. That way the brush is not cocked on the armature. So you make sure they're all laying perfectly flat, and make sure there's just a very slight angle on the end of that brush. Make sure that that angle of that brush, it's fitting tight against the armature. You'll see the long side and the short side. So make sure you get all those put on right. Put grease down in the tail shaft housing down here, and put a little bit of grease up here on the nose cone where the nose cone housing goes on, and you should be ready to put her all back together again. I was going to show you these old brushes. That's pretty incredible when you see one that's burned all the way down. It almost got the holder. But the 0720, I don't know. I've never had the starter off of it, so who knows how long that thing's been like that. Fittings that we had to tighten up that shook loose, that was what this bowl gasket was leaking. This fitting right here was leaking real bad, making a mess of things. And then this fitting right here, this 90-degree elbow right here on the fuel supply pump was leaking, and it just vibration over the years, I guess, shook it loose and it was making a mess. But what I was going to show you was what I had to use to tighten the thing up with. So what they call that is I call it a weatherhead socket. It's 3/8 drive, and it fits on the fitting. I'll show you how the fitting fits in there so that it doesn't screw up the threads. It doesn't screw up the threads when you go to tighten it up. You can see how it fits in there, and you can turn those fittings without screwing the threads up. And really, that fitting right there, without that socket, I'd have never got it tight. And then the other half of that was I had to use a angle head 1/2-inch wrench to hold the other side of that. But anyhow, I just wanted to show you these sockets. Weatherhead, or I call them a weatherhead socket. Some people call them a brass fitting socket, but they come in a set. They're not cheap, but they're a lifesaver. If you don't have them, you're going to be in trouble. So I put Zeptine degreaser all over this thing, and I mix it about 50-50 with some kerosene, and it really does a good job of taking that old stubborn grease that's been on there for a long time off. We got our new tires put on the front of it. We got our new ignition coils for our pony motor put in. We got our starter rebuilt. We got our fuel system fixed. My brother gave me a clutch cover. He gave me a used steering wheel. I got a new seat coming in the mail. I haven't got it yet. But she got a little bit of TLC. It all got greased up real pretty. And we're going to fire it up for you and show you how she runs now with that pony motor hitting on all 4 cylinders. One thing I was going to show you was the exhaust off of the pony motor. It comes through the intake manifold and preheats the intake manifold so that the air coming into the engine starts getting warmed up real quick. This is the muffler for the pony motor, and then this pipe that comes out underneath of here is the exhaust pipe. So when I get ready to start it, you watch underneath of this front end here, and you'll see the exhaust coming out of that little 4-cylinder pony engine that's going to start the 2-cylinder diesel engine. And before I get there, I was going to crawl up here and I was going to show you how that all comes about. So right here is your fuel. Turn your fuel on, 3 cranks. Turn your ignition switch on. Here's your choke. That's no choke and choke. Here's your throttle. Start and run. This one's your compression release. This one's your starter drive. So when you watch me start it, you'll see the engine start running. Then you're going to see me pull back on the compression release. Then you'll see me pull back on the starter drive and get the engine turning. And then I'll turn loose of the compression release, and hopefully it goes pop, pop, pop. To go to work. If you like it, give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.